All right, time for turning our attention to hurling. Paul Murphy's with us. Paul, how you doing?
Great, Ger. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited about the hurling this weekend. It kind of feels like there's been a lot of phony wars up to this point, but notwithstanding the finals exist as individual games, they also do have a bearing on the rest of the season, I think it's fair to say. When you're looking at the Kilkenny-Galway game, what's your instinct about which team is actually rising as the season goes on more than the other?
Yeah, well, I suppose Kilkenny's stock would be rising, I would say, in terms of where they started earlier on this year. Like, Galway really kicked into the league quite strong. League form goes out the window, obviously, when you go into championship. But Galway generally had a more steady league. Okay, outside influences hindered their league performances later on. But it certainly through the round-robin phase anyway, even finishing up, I think why the bookies have Galway edging Kilkenny by 2 points would be, you know, how they performed against Dublin. Like, Dublin were expected to come to Pearse Stadium, put in a savage performance. They didn't, but nevertheless Galway finished really strong to the round-robin phase. Whereas Kilkenny, after the performance against Wexford in Nolan Park, you know, there was one or two question marks afterwards, how they played, the style in which they played. Again, Kilkenny have made a good few changes to their starting lineup very late, you know, and announced in the stadium right before the game. So again, they haven't their steady 15 going where Galway probably do. And again, first blood has gone to Galway as well after the Pearse Stadium battle. But look, like you said, there was only a point in it up in Pearse Stadium. Galway for large periods kind of dominated the primary possession. So, but all in all, like you say, Kilkenny stayed in the game up in Pearse Stadium, and the final, not to use an old phrase, takes on a life of its own. So okay, the bookies have to go one way or another, but look, it comes down to a lot on the day, and form on the day into the final kind of goes out the window.
Tell me a little bit about what you think the impact of the Wexford game is going to be on the Kilkenny group. Those changes before throw-in, they seem to take a lot of people by surprise. Like, you know, talking to people and listening even to Tommy talking to Joe about, you know, the rumours coming through that Pádraig Welsh wasn't playing was just very interesting. Like, it's a very strange situation that. So part of me thinks no one really thought that Kilkenny weren't going to qualify, and so therefore a little bit of complacency seeps in, or a little bit of something like it's not desperate, it's not full throttle championship hurling, despite the fact you're at home. And that sounds unusual to say, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but like some kind of message gets sent out when, well, why is Pádraig Welsh not playing? You know? Yeah,
that's it, yeah. And well, it was very strange for me, because if you were to ask me 5 players that for this year are automatic starters on the Kilkenny team, Pádraig Welsh is one of them. And as I said to Will and James on the Hurling Pod was, you know, the question for me is not do you play Pádraig Welsh, it's where do you play him? Do you play him centre back? Do you play him centre forward? So like automatically I was sitting in the crowd that day, and when there was a few changes to the starting lineup, and when Pádraig Welsh was not starting and he's not injured, it just didn't make any sense. And I think, yeah, it probably did unsettle the Kilkenny team as well, because he's a player that makes the ball stick when it goes into the forward line. And Kilkenny that day, right or wrong, were playing a lot of long ball. They didn't work the ball up through the lines. And for me, if you're going to play that long ball, when Pádraig Welsh isn't there, well, you're going to have to find other ball winners to make that ball stick in the forward line. And Kilkenny didn't. In terms of Kilkenny's performance that day, I don't know, was there a complacency going into it? If there was, I'm happy they got it out of the way against Wexford, because if that complacency was there, you know, you could carry that into a Leinster final. We did it against Galway potentially in 2012, where we maybe carried a bit of complacency into it. What we would have always said about that Leinster final is we came to play a game, Galway came to win a game. So if there was complacency, I'm happy Kilkenny hopefully got it out of the way against Wexford. But yeah, I think maybe the team selections, the way that they jumped around a small bit, the Dublin game, there was, I think it was 3 changes or 4 changes. Again, we had more changes again against Wexford. So I think it's important for Kilkenny to actually nail down at least a 14 anyway. So, you know, you're always going to have that one player who comes in or out. But making 3 or 4 changes before a big game, you know, it can serve to unsettle the team. But again, I'm expecting more changes again, if I'm honest, before the Leinster final. I'm expecting whatever team is named tonight, we're going to have changes announced in Croke Park tomorrow from a Kilkenny point of view, I'm expecting.
Why do you think they haven't got it nailed down? Like, you know, there's loads of different reasons. Some players aren't playing well, some injuries happen, the management team are uncertain about what they're trying to do. For me, one theory is definitely that it comes back to they're quite unsure of their identity as a team when you know, we've been talking with Tommy across the championship about the style of play and the evolution of it and how they need to stick to it, and how in moments of crisis they haven't stuck to it, which means it's not fully embedded, and it just feels like there's mixed messages coming out about it.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there certainly seems to be a few mixed messages when it comes to what way are we playing. When I say we as Kilkenny, so the last day it was obvious to see that they're playing a lot of long ball, not working the ball through the lines, whereas pretty much every team across the country, including club teams, are working the ball up and working the possession. For Kilkenny, the way I'm looking at it at the moment anyway is, Kilkenny played Galway, and the team they played, they weren't winning enough possession in around that middle third. So they introduced a few players, the likes of Alan Murphy and these, into that middle third. And it kind of worked for them. They gained a bit of traction against Galway in the second half. So when they went into the Dublin match, they made a few more changes. Like Alan Murphy was in, Cian Kenny was in, Mossy Keoghan was in, got a great goal that day, I think, or 2 goals that day. So the changes worked. I think coming into Wexford, I would have been happy to see the team that started against Galway, maybe starting again, maybe introduce Conor Fogarty into the starting lineup as well. Another ball winner there around middle of the field. But it seems like Kilkenny decided that maybe what worked against Dublin was throwing at them something they didn't expect. Maybe that's what worked. Now, I'm guessing. So they tried to introduce that again against Wexford. Put something in there that Wexford weren't expecting. Walter Welch wasn't due to start. John Donnelly was there, but they put Walter Welch in there. And they took Pádraig Welch out. So maybe they tried to throw a curveball at Wexford and it didn't work. So I think maybe management are looking at, if we keep our cards close to our chest and we don't show our hand and we arrive on the day, well, potentially the opposition team won't figure out what we're doing and we'll have something that they won't be able to handle with on the day. But for me, the day that they played Dublin, Kilkenny played Dublin, that was a really strong team. That was a really good team. And like I said, Conor Fogarty potentially coming into middle of the field, getting a lad who'll be able to work there, win the ball, even likes of Killian Buckley and these lads, the kind of the old reliables. I think Kilkenny's team against Dublin was close enough to their best starting team. Again, like I said, introduce 1 or 2 more lads. So what for me with Kilkenny is, we're going out now on Saturday against Galway. Go with what you think is the strongest team. Just go with it, whether you name it tonight or, okay, you introduce it tomorrow. But for the rest of the championship, you're going to have to nail down a 14. And that for me seems to be a kind of a confusing message that's coming from the management to the team at the moment.
And look, it's really interesting. It seems like it's against the habit of a lifetime for what we've seen from Cody, that, I'm going to take into account the opposition more than what I think we're good at.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at Limerick, you look at the champions in any year. Generally, the champions will come with a 15 that they're happy that this is our 15. Okay, they might move them around. We saw with Limerick, Kyle Hayes popping up where they weren't expecting him against Cork. Like, I don't know. We wait and see about Cian Lynch over the weekend. I know we're talking about Kilkenny and Galway here, but generally, what Limerick name is what Limerick go with. They're the champions. And go back to other years as well. When Galway were the champions, even when Kilkenny were winning All Irelands as well, you go with your strongest 15 and you're not afraid to show your hand. So maybe this is just part of Kilkenny trying to find their footing in the championship, that maybe Brian and the lads are looking at it that, okay, we're mixing here between lads who are been blooded over the last few years with a bit of experience and get the blend, but maybe their priority at the moment is not to show the hand and try and use the panel of 20. Okay, the 15 is going to change each day, but try and provide something that a team won't be able to handle. That does seem to be part of the element of what Kilkenny are going with at the moment, as opposed to just going with a 15 that look fairly solid for the whole championship.
Yeah, it's like when you think about it, we're talking here about the career of the greatest hurling manager of all time, and the possibility of this season ending very soon if they don't get this right this weekend. And not to add, like, you guys obviously have lost Leinster finals and the season has ended in glory, so there's a pathway there. It's just that it feels a bit different. It feels like there's a team here uncertain of their identity. There's a management team who are second guessing themselves and it's not working for them at the moment. Again, already within this championship we've seen Cork go through a process where they've had similar difficulties and emerge the other side. So victory might allow them to catapult forward, but defeat would be like a significant blow for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it would. And you alluded to it there with Cork. Cork have found their confidence again, which is brilliant for Cork. And I was there in Welsh Park today against Waterford, and it was the Cork that we all want to see, Cork that are full of arrogance and up in people's faces. So Cork have managed to, I suppose, stop the rot and get their year back on the road, which is brilliant. And then, alternatively, we've looked at Waterford, and Waterford's year just fell off a cliff face very quickly. And that's what can happen because, the matches are coming thick and fast at the moment. And potentially, if you go into a back door now at the moment, you're going to meet a Cork who are on upward trend, or any other possibly team, like you could be meeting a Clare or a Limerick. Who's to know? So that back door is to be avoided, I think, especially this year. So for Kilkenny at the moment, yeah, they're not going with what traditionally Kilkenny would go with, and potentially playing a dangerous game a little bit from their team selection. But again, if you look at the last 2 Leinster finals, Kilkenny weren't expected to win them. And the one previous, like against Galway during COVID in an empty Crow Park, they weren't expected to win that. But coming down the home straight, the team came right, pipped over the line. And at the end of the day, Galway were probably the better team in that match overall over the 70 minutes. But Kilkenny just had the cuteness to go about, win that match. Seek out Galway's weaknesses during that game, clever introduction to Richie Hogan. So Kilkenny have won the last 2 Leinster finals, really probably against the grain, and all bar the Wexford match this year. Kilkenny were actually going quite well. A serious defeat of Dublin in Parnell Park by double figures. So I'm not too quick to look at one match and go, okay, well that's decided for this year. Kilkenny have been on an upward trend generally. Defeated by a good Galway team in Pearse Stadium. It's only one game as far as I'm concerned, that the flat game was against Wexford. So the Leinster final, if Kilkenny come away from this Leinster final on Saturday night with a win, we'll be back to talking about, they figured it out and they always find a way in finals. The narrative will be different again.
Yeah.
But it's again, they are coming into it as the underdogs.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If they figure it out this weekend, then all of a sudden they're really dangerous, because there's a load of young players who we can see like a 2-year-old thoroughbred racehorse, where suddenly the summer opens up out in front of them, and if they win, they're up against a team in the next round who will probably have come through the back door and who probably will have come through a difficult game to get to them. There's time for them to work on stuff in training, and there's a bit of power behind them and a bit of excitement about them. But if they lose, I suppose that's why I'm so fascinated by this game. And on the other side of it, obviously, is Henry Shefflin, who he hopes has added that little bit of steel that prevents Galway from being as flaky as they have been against Kilkenny over the last decade.
Yeah, and Henry will be aware of that as well, because Henry, having come through the rigours over the last 15, 20 years or so, having played backdoor hurling as well, that will certainly benefit to him, in terms of he'll know that we want to go the clean route here, get into an All-Ireland semi-final and have that break, because that break is crucial as well, because teams have been going, let's say, week on week, for example. Okay, they've had 2 weeks off here and there, but teams have been going week to week, injuries, trying to make sure you keep your form, trying to figure out, okay, when do we step off away from the team here now, in terms of giving them a little bit of a break, when do we go at hard sessions. But crucially, coming into an All-Ireland semi-final, let's say for the team who wins, they get that little bit of time where they can actually prepare. They can maybe go away for a weekend, tactically look at what they did over the course of the round robin, which maybe they haven't had a chance to do at this stage, and it allows them just to reassess where they are and have a real good stab at going to an All-Ireland. Whereas the loser in this game, in this game on Saturday night, goes into a qualifier where they haven't much time to turn around again. They're looking at their injuries, they haven't much time to reassess, and to be honest, probably questioning themselves after losing the Leinster final. And equally for the team, probably not so much who lose the Munster final, because both of those teams are in a really good place at the moment. But crucially for this one, whoever wins it gets that break, and kind of, I suppose, it confirms that they're headed in the right direction, and nobody really cares on Saturday night how you win, just as long as you win and you get yourself that break.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to be if we're sitting down watching the game and it's half an hour gone or it's 50 minutes gone, what are you looking at to see the trend go in the right direction for both teams?
For both teams, look, I suppose I've talked enough about Kilkenny. I'll say with Galway, look, Galway were very dominant about winning the primary possession. We talk about that middle third, it's all the talk at the moment in hurling, but Galway were very dominant in that area. They were also very dominant at which are killer blows, turning over the ball against Kilkenny when in Pearse Stadium and getting a score off it. They did it several times where Kilkenny were trying to work the ball out, and rightfully so, trying to work it out. And they turned it over, so Galway will be looking to do that. They'll look to put pressure on Kilkenny, turn that ball over and force Kilkenny to strike that long ball they were striking against Wexford. So Galway, I feel, are going to sit back. They'll try and force Kilkenny to strike that long ball down on top of Daithí Burke, down on top of Garrod McInerney and so on, and look to build from there. Cathal Mannion will drop back and they'll look to work the ball up then through the lines. Whereas Kilkenny, what Kilkenny will want to do is they'll want to get a foothold in the game and, I suppose, stem the tide of what they were doing against Wexford and work the ball up through the lines. And like I said, I've just described what Galway are going to do. Galway are going to come at them fierce and try and stop that. So it's important for Kilkenny to establish their game, like their game plan within this game early on, first 10 or 15 minutes, and get a few scores. And no one will mind if you're behind by 2 points or ahead by 2 points, because it's not that much of a difference in hurling. But after 15-20 minutes, and significantly after about 20 minutes in Pearse Stadium, that's where Kilkenny kind of lost grip on the game. They'll be looking to finish right up to half time, having imposed their game plan in Galway, and that game plan is going to be working the ball up to midfield, drawing out the Galway half back line, and try and pop the balls into that full forward line in there, where I expect they'll have someone physical like Mossy Keown in full forward on Daithí Burke, and try and win that physical battle. So that's where I think both teams are going to try and win and lose the game in the first half.
Paul, you were very strong about what Adrian Mullen needs to do this year to establish himself as one of the leaders of the team and to fulfil the potential that we've all seen him have. And obviously, coming back from the horrific injury has taken a bit longer than maybe everybody would have liked, because he definitely has the potential to be one of those hurlers that we talk about as the best hurler in the country. There's a sense that perhaps Croke Park might be where that actually happens for him more likely than in the confines of the grounds that he's been playing in. Is that fair? Are you expecting a bigger game from him than we've seen already this year?
Yeah, well, what I'm hoping from Adrian Mullen is, I suppose, there's something that's out of Adrian Mullen's hands. I'm hoping that they put him back in the half-forward line. They had him out midfield against Wexford, and for me, it's just too far from goal for him. It's like bringing Owen Cody out to midfield. Owen Cody's a dangerous man. He'll go toe-to-toe with any half-back line, the same as Adrian Mullen will. We saw last year in the All-Ireland semi-final what Adrian Mullen can do in crucial times in a game when Kilkenny need a goal. Adrian is such an intelligent hurler, and in terms of his skill is undoubted as well. So for me, have your workhorses at midfield who are going to win that ball, but Adrian Mullen needs to be asking questions of the Galway half back line. And if Adrian Mullen's in the half back line, whoever it is, Pádraig Mannion or whoever, has to keep tabs on him. So you're going to occupy one of the members of that half back line. So I've no doubt about Adrian's ability, and Adrian was working really hard in every game he's been in. But I think the management just have to push him up. Like, Adrian will play where you put him. He'll play in the half back line if you put him back there. But I think for the business end, he needs to be up around the half forward line, causing real problems, because Croke Park is made for the likes of Adrian, the likes of Owen Cody. They don't fear it, they relish it, they love it, the wide open spaces. So to get the most out of these lads, and particularly Adrian, back into the half forward line, even if you want to throw him in around full forward, but he has huge running ability, he is a great athlete. So for me, I think where you get the most out of him is wing forward.
Yeah, there's loads that little changes they could make that all aggregate into this massive increase in performance, and all of a sudden we're like, it was obvious, of course Kilkenny were going to be able to do this because they got those decisions right. Last question for you on this. So you're talking about the team, potentially the changes being made. Do the players know who are being selected in the real team? Like, is that broken to the team midweek? Are they told the dummy team, and then is that dummy how does that work? What do the selectors tell the actual players?
Well, I suppose, look, I obviously be in contact with the lads, like just being friends with them and that, but I'd never asked them, because obviously every team in the country, you kind of have, not that you have a siege mentality, but there's information that you don't give out to outside the team. But certainly what we would have always done with Kilkenny, and I don't see why Brian or the lads would have changed it, is that you like to name the team maybe 2 or 3 days out. So I'm presuming if they trained last night or Wednesday night potentially, I'd say probably last night, 2 nights out from the final, they probably trained and they would have named the team as is going to start on Saturday night, but probably would have said, listen lads, this is the team that's going to be in the paper. Now the team that they name might also be the team that's in the paper or that's announced tonight or whatever, it may be the case. But any time that I've experienced it where the team that's named in the paper isn't the one that's starting, we get the team first of all that is going to start, and then at the end of the session, at the end of the meeting, they'll just say, lads, the team that's going to appear in the paper is completely different, or they might even show us the team that's going to be named in the paper, and they'll just say to us, listen lads, keep it to yourself. And it is important for those players to keep it to themselves, because every team, whether you're Clare, Limerick, Waterford, Tip, it's, that team has to stay inside the dressing room, because it completely loses its purpose if it gets outside the dressing room. So I'd never put any lads under pressure. I don't need to know the team. It doesn't make a difference to me. I'll see it on Saturday night.
No, totally. And to be honest, I don't think it makes a difference to anybody. It is this kind of weird thing where it's like, we're giving too much information to the opposition, but ultimately they're going to find out, and I presume they have contingency plans. If that team is not the real team, we'll just do this instead, and it's not that big a deal, is it?
No, it's not that big of a deal, but teams are just looking for every inch, every yard they can expose a team for, and what this might possibly do would be just to give Galway a problem that they have to deal with for 10 minutes. Or likewise, Galway might do it for Kilkenny. Galway might be going, listen, Conor Whelan will start at full forward. But for example, Conor Whelan might be full forward, and they might go, listen lads, we know Conor Whelan is someone that Kilkenny are going to man mark. Conor Whelan go right half forward, for the first 10 or 15 minutes and see how Kilkenny react. So this is what teams try and do. And if you get 10 minutes out of it, it may be 10 minutes where you score 1-2 or 1-3, and that's the platform that will allow you to go on and win the match. And for that 10 or 15 minutes, the opposition management are trying to figure out what's different here. What is the thing that we didn't expect?
I get that. I definitely, and I understand that. I do wonder though that if you're, and I don't want to focus on Pádraig Walsh, but if you're somebody else, right? Anybody, any player who's like a stalwart of the team, and you're not in the team that's named, but then afterwards you're taken aside and so, by the way, the whole country thinks you are playing this weekend. There's definitely like a little bit of extra man management that needs to go into that. You need to be a little bit careful about what a player's motivation is going to be like, and everybody's going to say, oh, it's up to the player to be a team player, but we're all humans. Like, you know, we all get disappointed, and that's a real thing too.
Absolutely, and I think it's even more real if that player is going well in training and is expecting to start, but for a tactical change you decide not to start him and it's not explained to them. That's another thing that can happen. I don't know if it happens in other setups, but certainly if you're really making a conscious decision to go, right, we're going to throw something here that Galway aren't expecting, and one player suffers because of it, but you explain the reasoning behind that to the player, well, I think a player then has the option to row in and go, fine. But if a player is sacrificed and it's not explained to him, but that player's going, geez, I'm flying it in training, I'm definitely starting Saturday night, but then sees themselves on the bench, that's quite confusing for a player. And I agree with you, that's not a positive effect. So you really have to look. In the modern game, maybe back 30 years ago, managers wouldn't care and you're told to take it on the chin. But certainly in the modern game, players, you know, need that feedback. Need to know I'm breaking my hole here in training. Why am I starting or why am I not starting? So I'd agree with you. It can be to the detriment if you do it too many times or do it in the wrong way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, we'll see. A team will be named at some point tonight, and a different team will take the field tomorrow, we think. But either way, it's going to be good. Paul, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks very much, Ger.
It's Paul Murphy there. You can hear the full analysis and breakdown on the Hurling Pod. If you don't subscribe to the Hurling Pod, well then, I don't know. You just need to, because it's brilliant. Get on it. Search the Hurling Pod wherever you get your podcasts. The best place is on the OTB Sports app. And it's excellent stuff. Himself and James Skehill and Will O'Callaghan, week in, week out, dropping truth bombs about the Hurling